welcome to the latest episode of the Lisa Pizik Show. Even though this podcast is named after me, it actually has nothing to do with me. It's about the amazing guests that I bring on to share their knowledge, their skills, their expertise. And I'm so excited today because I have somebody on that has never spoken on my podcast about this thing, this business opportunity, this skill that we so need to hone in on now as thought leaders, coaches, people online. All about doing what we're doing right now. Podcasts, Zoom, online summits. I'm talking about your voice. And we're going to talk about different ways that you can use it and creative ways that you can stretch yourself. And then if you fall in love with it, how to make a business out of it. Because impact, income, that's what we're all about on this podcast. So today I have with me Lili Wexu. Lili, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Let me tell you about Lili. So she is a voice actor, announcer, and author. You may recognize her voice from the opening and closing ceremonies of the 2010 Winter Olympics Games. She's also appeared in Grey's Anatomy, Alien vs. Predator in small roles, and her voice has lent her to the video game franchise Assassin's Creed. Canadians, hello fellow Canadian, yay! Will recognize her voice from traveling on Air Canada, as well as Health Canada, Uber, and the Brick ads. And originally from Montreal, but you have been living in LA for the last 8 years. And you have an ebook series, Get Clever About Voice Acting and Announcing, for actors, aspiring voice actors, to use their skills to tap into this rapidly evolving, expanding industries. And you wrote it kind of like the For Dummies series, which I love, because it's that keep it simple, you know what the last S is for, yes? So I love that. And tell our listeners a little bit about voice acting and how you got into this and how you made a business out of it and how you got here.
Well, it was sort of an accident. I really wanted to be an actress and I was all about, theater. And, but when I was younger, around 19 years old, people just said, oh, you have a great voice. You should do radio. And I was like, okay, great. Well, how do I do that? And I happened to work in a bar, which was like a restaurant bar. And, it just happened to be a local hangout for DJs because we aired a local Montreal radio show at that bar, like the lunch hour radio show was hosted there. So the DJs hung out there all the time and they would say, you should come by the station and record some voiceovers. And I was like, yeah, right. And then one day, Howard Stern came onto the air in Montreal and unknowingly realized, he insulted French Canadians, as all good, Americans or whatever, Anglophones tend to do from time to time. And not realizing that about 65% of his audience at that station was French Canadian. So the competing station, which was airing their show at the bar I worked at, said, we got to do a campaign. We got to do something to say that we understand that you're listeners, that you're French Canadians, and we care about you, even though we're an Anglophone radio station. Anglophone and Francophone is a big thing in Quebec. Yeah. So they did this campaign, and they knew I was bilingual. So they said, hey, this is your time. Come into the station. You'll read these liners in English, but you'll translate them and read them in French as well to tell our French Canadian audience that, we're listening to them. And I thought, great, this is a professional opportunity. I'm going to do it. And that's what I call beginner's luck, right? So I had this thing going on. People paid attention. Oh, you have a good voice. And then I had an opportunity and I got into the door. So I did that and it went great and I loved it. It took me like 50 takes to do like 2 lines. But, I loved it. And then I had to work really hard to turn it into a business. But that's how it started at the beginning. So it can start with beginner's luck. It doesn't always, but it can. But everybody past that has to build something. And then I worked really, really hard for years after that to build a business. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. It's kind of like that right place, right time.
Yes.
But then what?
Yeah. And that's And that's a big thing. It's a big thing. And a lot of people start without the beginner's luck, but it's the same process. It's always the
Mhm.
same process, which is, what are my skills? What can I learn? Do I need any training to get better at this? And then how can I turn my strengths into a business opportunity?
Yeah, and obviously you enjoy it because you're still doing it.
Yeah, of course,
And
of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like a miniature version of acting. Now it's more acting than it was when I started. When I started, it was all about voice inflection and sounding good and having a pleasant voice on the radio.
right.
Now it's a lot more about acting, which is great, which I love.
Yeah.
But when I started, it was like a miniature version of acting. Now it's pretty much, if you've got to learn some acting if you want to do this really full time, or if you're a speaker, like a lot of your audience are, then a lot of those people have natural storytelling skills. So that kind of crosses over into acting, right? They have empathy. They can just put themselves in the shoes of the people whose stories they're telling, and so that's the same kind of skill.
I love that. And what was coming up for me when you were talking is that you always land kind of where you were meant to land. Like you wanted
Yes.
to be an actress and that was your goal. And you weren't probably even thinking about voiceover and this whole area, but you still get to do, as you said, that storytelling and that acting and that character development and all of that fun play and hard work, but you get to do it in a different way, which is
Yes. It's funny that you say that, because when I was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, I thought I had a really good voice. I don't know. Nobody told me I did. I thought probably my voice was lower than all the other kids. And I'd noticed that. I just thought, I should be a singer and somebody should discover me, and that didn't happen. And I took singing lessons, and it turned out it was a nightmare. I was told I sounded like a buzzing bee. It totally scarred me for life. And then, but I also thought, I'll be an actress and whatever. And it's funny that it happened that way. When I was 19, it's actually my voice, which was kind of my first thing that I wanted to do. But then, I had morphed into acting, but both together, conversion to voice acting. And I find that when you're a kid, we know a lot of the times the things that we want to do. So around that, if you can think back when you were 7 or 8 years old, what you wanted to do, a lot of that will inform what you should be doing, and probably some of what you're already doing, and could be expanded as well.
totally that permission to dream when you don't have
Hmm.
someone telling you, oh, that's
Yeah.
you sound like a buzzing bee, you sound
Yeah.
awful, give it up, all those unhelpful things that scar us from
Yes.
tutors and mentors and coaches and all of that. So do you find that because it's voice, so like acting, you are in front of the camera, do you find that you have more freedom and flexibility by not being seen by the camera and it's just your voice, or do you think it's the same?
I think it's the exact same skill. I think there is a sort of a freedom that you can not have any makeup on. Nobody's kind of looking at you. There's not that scrutiny, which I think for women especially can be a little bit daunting when you're speaking. But then it's a whole other thing, right? Speaking is almost, it's psychological. Like people, I found over the years, people have a lot of insecurities about their voice and how they sound, and they spend a lot of energy on that. So it depends on the person.
Right.
Um, I think if you're the thing about being behind the microphone is, it's like the camera. They say in acting, the camera doesn't lie. The microphone doesn't lie either. If you're not in a good mood, if it all translates, right? But what I do like about it is that, nobody can scrutinize your looks, which is a good thing. But there's also a thing with the microphone where you can't kind of go off the microphone. You have to kind of always stay near. And so that can be also jarring for people, right? Especially people who like to move around or whatever, like me. I'm always like hitting my microphone.
Same.
Um, but so there is an adjustment there. But yeah, it can be freeing for some people. But unless they have a thing with their voice, then it can be frightening as well. But I'm here to tell you, it's about who you are. It's not about your voice. I know a lot of people who don't have like good voices, like aesthetically pleasing voices, who make a fortune. So it's about who you are and how you deliver that story. It has nothing to do with your voice. Of course, if you have a pleasing voice, it's like if you're very beautiful and you want to be an actress, it's not going to hurt you. But
Right.
at the same time, uniqueness, whatever you bring to the table, like there are plenty of people who are not conventional is, I guess, the word I'm looking for, in our collective, conventionality or whatever. And they do very, very well because they have other skills. They're very authentic. They can tell a story like nobody else can. And so it really becomes about what you're giving people and not about what you sound like or what you look like.
Yeah, not trying to fit into a box, being
Yeah.
all of you.
Yes.
When you think about the actors and actresses that we love, or that we loved, Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, like just these they don't fit in any boxes. They didn't fit in any boxes. They were quirky, they were awkward, they were weird, they were way out of the box. And
you have to really work with and you have to really work with what you have. What you have is your strength. So long as you're plugged into that and you're aware of that, and you reinforce that within yourself, and you find teachers and coaches and mentors that will reinforce that with you instead of beating you down. That's really, really, really important. You have to celebrate all of your uniqueness. It's very important, and that's what people look for. Actually, casting directors, people, it's funny because if you it's kind of a privileged thing to do, but if you ever were a casting director, it's funny how the most beautiful voices, they don't necessarily stand out. It'll be the best performance. That's what will stand out because we hear that with our hearts, so yeah.
We hear it with our hearts. Oh, that's so true. Any movie you watch, any music you listen to, it's that sometimes guttural or emotion or that beat, and then the way that singer, it's like when you hear a cover song. It's one song, but you could hear 5 different people cover it, and you're drawn to make one version over the other because of who that person, their interpretation of it. And
exactly.
And that's business. That's even business basics. It's don't try to do it like someone else. Don't try to act like someone else. Don't try to speak like someone else. Don't market like someone else does. You have to stay true to you. And I love that you hit that message right out of the gate. So good. Now let's talk about voice protection. So if you're using your voice all the time, maybe not protection, but preservation might be a better word. Tell us about that.
So one of the things over the years that I've found is you can actually overuse your voice. I've done it one time where I took this contract, and it was very demanding, and it was hours and hours of recording on end. And then I was so scared of losing my regular clients because I kind of had to cancel everything else and just take care of this one client. But I was so scared of losing everybody else that I just didn't tell them that I was busy, and I serviced everybody. And I eventually ran out to a point where the voice just got really thin until there was nothing that would just come out anymore. And what I learned through that is I had to do speech therapy after that. To learn to use my voice properly. And so one of the best things you can do is, and I know this is really hard if you have a family, but try to not speak for the first hour. The reason is that when you're lying down, your larynx is this way. And then when you wake up, your larynx, it will be up, and it takes about an hour to reposition itself. So if you do speak, just don't speak a lot. And don't whisper. Whispering is really, really bad. You're grating on your vocal cords. So whispering is not a solution to not speaking. Not speaking is the solution to not speaking or speaking very little. And then after that, what you can do as a quick warm up is, and you do this for ladies, before you do all your makeup and all that, you just boil some water, and you can put it in a bowl, and then stick your face with a towel over your head and just breathe that steam for about 5 minutes. That's just like you're hydrating your vocal cords. It's really, really good. Obviously, drinking water all day long. You'll have to go to the bathroom all the time. And I know if you're doing a public speaking thing, can be tough. You don't want to drink water right before, but being regularly hydrated is very important. But as your warm up, you want to inhale the steam. It's very, very good. And then after that, what you can do is before speaking, you start making sounds. So you want to vibrate the M's on your lips. And you can do that for a few minutes. You can do that in the shower. If you don't have time to do the steam thing, you're like, okay, girl, I'm busy. I gotta go. In the shower, just breathe in the shower, because the vapor in the shower is one of the ways that a lot of the hydration comes into our skin. We don't realize that, but that's a very big way of being hydrated. So just breathe, take deep breaths in the shower, and then go for the M's, and you vibrate those M's on your lips. And then you can add some vowels, me, ma, mo, and you do that. You can do that for 5 minutes. And then after that, time is running short. You got to go. Just grab some tongue twisters. There, you can just Google them, tongue twisters, and just like, I don't know, say 5 of them like 15 times each or 10 times each, just to get your mouth to like start to cooperate with what you're going to say. And it just wakes you up. And that'll be that. There's longer versions of warm-ups, but we're all busy and got a million things to do. So that would be the short version. And if you do that before starting to speak every day, you're just gonna help your voice to get going in the day. Another thing is for people who love to sing, singing is like Botox for the voice. So if you love singing or you would like to sing, this is great. It'll build some resonance into your voice. It makes the voice just as good as it can get. So singing is a huge recommendation for me. And also singing will force you to interpret the song. And that's a really good exercise as well. Like sometimes you'll find yourself crying. And then there's also kinds of traumas with singing. A lot of people have trauma with singing, as I had. But it's good to get all that out as well. So those would be my quick kind of voice tips.
Oh, I love that. Even not speaking in the first hour. I prefer quiet in the first hour. Sometimes my house is chaos with our 7-year-old and my husband, and but it's like just being really intentional about your voice almost as a business tool. I mean, if you use it for business, just like you need your microphone or you need your computer or there's the camera or whatever, your online calendar, like whatever tools you use, your voice is the same. Your website, you have upkeep, you have maintenance, your voice is the same thing. I think I heard something once too that Celine Dion, when she would have her concerts, she would not speak for a whole day. Like she refused to talk.
It's a real thing, like preserving your voice. You don't realize that it's a finite thing until you lose your voice out of over speaking, because we lose our voice sometimes because we get sick, laryngitis or whatever. But when you lose it from over speaking, you realize that, wow, there's a limit to this thing, and anybody who's a speaker knows, like, I'm sure you get tired, your voice gets tired, and you do have to take care of it, because once it runs out, if you make a living with your voice and it runs out, it is terrifying.
I know. I couldn't even imagine some of the conferences I go to or mentors I've studied with that do 3-4 day events and just rooms packed with thousands of people. What do you do when you are the speaker and on day 2 of a 4-day event, it's gone?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's like a nightmare, right? So it's this warm up, and then I'm sure the recovery is important as well. If you've been speaking all day at a conference, or so recovery is maybe the same, don't speak.
It's the same. Recovery is don't speak. Like if I've had a huge day in the booth and one of my best girlfriends calls me and I know that every time I'm on the phone with her, it's like at least an hour minimum, I do not pick up the phone that day. I can't, because the next day my voice will be diminished. So yes, after a long day of speaking, do not speak. Don't go talking to your mom or your best friends, or, just keep it short. If you do, just keep it short, text, just, keep it simple. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think the last question my listeners probably want to know is the setup. And how do they have world-class sound when they're being interviewed or they're, speaking, whether it's their own event or someone else's event or a podcast? Are there any tips or tricks about your voice or your setup or your equipment that they could know or should know?
Well, the first things first is no equipment is going to make up for a noisy room. So you really want to pick the right place in your home to work. And that's often, unfortunately, a closet for most people. Now, if you live in the suburbs and you have one of those development homes that has those big closets where you can have your arms out, that's fantastic. You lucky you. Use that closet. That'll be any walk-in closet is great. But for other people, the smaller closet is going to be the solution. reverberation. And so that's number one. So picking the right space, and then the padding in that space. I don't know if you can see, like behind me, it's all like these white things. Those are acoustic panels. These are kind of fancy. You don't need that. You can wear, you can put, you can wear them too, blankets. But it's better if you don't wear anything that makes noise, obviously, when you're recording. But you can put blankets on the walls, like a duvet blankets is what I'm thinking about, or moving blankets. You can get them on Amazon. They're really cheap. They're kind of stinky when you first get them, so you might want to air them out, leave them outside for a few days before you bring them into the house. But blankets all over the wall, because the padding is what's going to absorb a lot of the sound in that small, tiny closet space that you have. Or if you're in a large space, also you might want to have paddings in the walls, because sometimes in a large space we have echo, and in a small space we have reverberation, which is the sound is bouncing off the wall and coming right back at us. So you want to diminish that with some padding. So once you've picked the space and you have good padding, and you can put it on the walls, on the ceiling, you can have carpet on the floor, whatever's going to absorb the most sound, now you can get equipment. So now you're talking about a microphone. And for podcasting and speaking and all that, you can get a USB mic that plugs right into your computer. For voiceovers, I don't recommend that, because you might do sessions with other studios. We call them remote sessions, and they don't like USB microphones. Not that they're not good quality, they just never work with them, and they're like, oh, what's that? It's another animal. I don't like it. I don't want it. But in the world of podcasting and all that, you can use a USB mic. I like Rode. RODE is a great brand. They're not sponsoring me in any way. I've had Rode microphones. This is not even a Rode microphone, but they're really good for podcasting. There are other brands as well, but you can use a USB mic. The important thing is, if you do use a laptop, be careful if your laptop, if it's an older laptop, it has a fan, and the fan can go off when you're recording, and that'll ruin your recording. So you don't want to introduce any intermittent sounds into your recordings, right? You want everything to be just sounding perfect. So you might need to put, the computer like kind of outside of the room, and then have a camera that comes inside. That could be a solution. I'm not a professional podcaster for how to set up your podcasting situation, but it's very important not to introduce noises that can be intermittent, unannounced. So if you, for example, in my studio for recording, my computer, the actual tower, is outside of my studio. So I've drilled a hole I have a booth. I have it's like a little house in a house, and I've drilled a hole, and the wire goes through there so that the computer can be outside of my booth, because that computer, the fan goes off, and then I can't have that during a recording. So for podcasting, yeah, you can just have a USB mic to your computer, and that would be great. If you want to one up a little bit the quality, then you can have an external sound card for your microphone. And in that case, I wouldn't get a USB microphone. I would get what you call an XLR connection microphone. It's got 3 prongs. You can look it up online, XLR connection. It's got 3 prongs, and that's how the microphone connects into the into the external sound card. And with that, you can get a little bit, your microphone can be a little bit of higher quality. It can still be a Rode, or you can look into other brands, but there's one Rode for about $200. NTG something, and that works really well, and you can get an external sound card. I've reviewed a few, actually. If you go on my website, there's a review of there's multiple pairings that I've done that I can recommend. So Lisa we'll share that with them, with your audience. So that's pretty much it. But like I said, the most important part is really the space that you're going to be working in, and any padding that you'll need into that space. Because after that, the gear is you don't need the top end gear if you have a good sounding space. So I would say, don't spend too much money on the gear. Spend more time and energy working in a good space and making that space as good as it can be acoustically, which is the padding on the walls, so that sound doesn't bounce everywhere.
I love that you hit that first, because everybody automatically thinks sound, lighting. Even in our home, we've had to shift and move with, having a little guy virtual schooling and us all on our, devices. But we're actually we were looking into the Rode mic that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. I have the Yeti now, but the Rode is so much better. Perfect. And then B, converting one of our small bedrooms upstairs with the booth and the padding and making it smaller, everything that you were talking about is what we've been looking into now that I speak so much from
Yes.
home, and everything is virtual now. And I don't think virtual is going to go away. I think we are going to eventually, yes, get back in person, but we've opened up the world to being able to connect just in different ways and serve people in different ways. So I love that you talked about the setup of your location first. Because if you want to be employed and get gigs and be in this, it's probably going to get competitive at some point, even who has the best setup at home and how you deliver the goods from home. So that's so important that you said that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like exactly like you said, like, so sometimes I cast some projects on, and I hear auditions of people, and then I have to discard the ones that don't have good quality, even though they have a great performance and everything. Unless I can get them in a professional studio, I have to discard them. So it is important if you want to be competitive. And yeah, it's kind of one of these things, like it's a nightmare to think about it. You're like, oh God, I have to work in a closet, but you have to make it comfortable, and but the time you will spend doing that will pay off. It really will, because when people get the quality, they're going to be like, okay, I'm in business with this person. I don't have to worry about the technical issues with this person. I can just hire them and I know it's going to be professional.
Yeah. And it shows that you care, that you're being intentional about the way you're delivering, which is huge too. So tell us about Get Clever About Voice Acting and Announcing. Tell us about this ebook thing you got going on.
Well, I wrote these ebooks, Get Clever About Voice Acting and Announcing. It took me many years, but I love teaching, and I'm that kind of person that friends always call for help and stuff like that, and I call them too, obviously. But I'm just that kind of person that I love to help people. And when you do voiceovers, people always ask you, how do you get into it, and how can I do it? And so it was always going to happen. It was always a matter of if and not when. But I always, I had a bit of the imposter syndrome, like, why would I, do that? And then, I just did it. And so I basically take people from, not having any experience, not knowing anything and how to get into it, from like A, B, and C, like getting into it from an artistic perspective, to B, getting set up from a technical perspective, which is what we were just talking about, and C, how do you make money with this thing? So it's kind of a journey. It's like a compass through the maze, because it's a bit of a jungle out there, like anything, right? If you wanted to do digital marketing, right, Lisa? Like, it's like, oh my God, where do I start? Right. So it's a bit of a manual of from point A to B to C. And I think it after that, you sort of have a really good idea of what is expected of you, where you should be starting, and what your end point could be. So it's like a that's why I called it like the street kid version of the dummies, because it's just like really straightforward. I'm not holding anything back. It's everything I know that has worked for me for the past 20 years, and things have evolved, and this is how it works right now, like especially since the pandemic hit, because the books were almost finished when the pandemic hit, and then I put the finishing touch at the beginning of like at the end of March, and April is when I wrapped it all up, because already the whole industry was shifting, and I added that into the book, so you're getting a very accurate picture of what's going on right now in the industry. And I wanted to just get it out on time too in the pandemic, because so many of my actor friends were like, they're asking me to have my own setup now, and I can't do voiceovers unless I do it from home. And so I just tried to get it out as soon as possible. But it's also very helpful for teachers and speakers and people who love, if you have a connection to your voice or to storytelling in any way, this will just tell you how that whole world works if you wanted to get into it more professionally.
I love that so much. And one thing you said, the generosity, how you're like, it's everything I know from the last 20 years.
Yeah, it is.
I love that so much, because an ebook or something that is on the lower level price-wise, not value-wise, but usually, an ebook versus a course or a one-to-one or a mastermind.
Yeah.
A lot of times creators fall into or they've been given bad advice, which is just give them a little taste and then make them pay you for the goods. And that is like nails on a chalkboard for me. No, give them the best of what you have. Be generous. And it's like karma. Not only will they refer to you, send people back to you, I believe in karma. Like what you put out comes back to you. And if you're generous, Next thing you know, that big agent's calling you for that big movie or that big thing because you put these amazing ebooks and goodness out into the world.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, coming from a place of fear too. It's like if you don't give it, it's like, oh, I'm scared. I'm going to give all my secrets, and then everybody's going to do it, and then I'm not going to get any work anymore. If you're really good at what you're doing, people are not going to stop hiring you. And also to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning was that what makes me employable is my unique thing, right? So I have this unique thing that I do, and nobody else can do it quite like me. And whatever you do is whatever you do. Nobody can do it quite like you. So we all have to believe in our own uniqueness and what we do. And honestly, also the other thing is, my books, they tell you everything I know, but you have to go and do the work. Yeah. Like they're just a map. Okay. Like they're just a map. Like you have to go ahead and do the work. And I can't charge you for that. I can just give you the map so that you can, and also one of the reasons also I put it together that way is that voiceovers can be a very expensive, thing to get into because coaching is so expensive and there are so many things that you can end up having to pay for. And I think that you can end up spending a lot of money and not getting a whole lot out of it in the end. And I wanted to give people a roadmap to know, like, be careful where you spend your money. And if you do it this way that I'm explaining, you're going to get more return on your investment than if you just pay this person and that person and that person. So that's why they're affordable, because it's like, look, this is a roadmap. Because a lot of people come into voiceovers too, they're artists or teachers or, people that don't necessarily have a huge budget. Like I've made the mistake. I've paid a lot of money because I could afford it, but not everybody can do that. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to give back also in that way where you don't have to spend $1 million, not a million, but you don't have to spend thousands of dollars because it accumulates. And then the person has spent like thousands of dollars out and they're like, oh, this didn't work. So if you do it judiciously and carefully by following a roadmap, you have a higher potential for return on investment, but you're still going to have to spend money to make it happen, but at least with some barometers, with some parameters that can help you, through. Otherwise, it can just be like throwing money out the window. And when it comes to art forms and all that, it can be tricky. And I like to give people some structure, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. I love your generosity. I love you're saving people so much time and money and energy.
Yeah.
Yes, they still have to do the work, but it's like, listen to what I say and follow this. And you're not flying blindly into it if you're wanting to do this and do this better. I love this. So where can they find you? Tell us your website or the best place that they can go to learn more about you.
Sure. So the books are on getcleverabout.com. And then there's a page of I think it's voice acting and announcing, but you'll just get on the site and you'll see it right away. There's a blog there as well about equipment, about all the equipment that we talked about earlier. I did some pairings and some testing, and there's some even prices next to it, so you can check all that out. And if you want to check my voiceovers out, you can go to liliwexuvoiceovers.com. But check the getcleverabout.com website for the books and any tips that I have about the business. I'm writing blogs, sometimes more frequently than others, but they're all there. You can also find me on YouTube as well. I have tutorials on YouTube about setting up your studio space and things like that. So I'm everywhere.
Awesome. Yay. So don't worry if you're driving in the car or you're out running or you've got kids in your arms and you're not able to get down all the places to find Lili. I will make sure all of her goodness is in the show notes. And Lili, thank you so much for giving us so much goodness, so much I love just your message in the beginning about your unique self. And I think that's so important as we are out there and we're creators and we're marketers and we're entrepreneurs and thought leaders and all these things that we're moms and dads and all these things that we are. I think it's so important that the root of it is never losing who you are and being authentic to you. And I think that was just such a beautiful message. In addition to the hands-on, tactical stuff about your space and all that goodness. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. You're incredible. And you're also a very generous person. This was a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for being here. And we'll catch you next time on The Lisa Pizik Show.